cheated. A lot of times I like to program from my memory because it helps you remember. But I didn't know that there was a client put object from Boto3 S3. So what I did, and it's worth looking at this because there's a lot of information. Now I really didn't spend a lot of time on this. If you notice, probably 10 minutes. But I was thinking, okay, so I can't send the large data because what it's doing in the large data when it converts it to bytes to do the splitting, what happens then, those bytes is then converted to a string, and just the nature of the way things are, it likes to think that you want to escape characters. So therefore it messes all that up. So what I did do was, instead of doing the send large data, let's get rid of this. Instead of doing that, what I did was simple enough to say, okay, let's go ahead and do an upload. I'm taking the raw Hadoop. I'm passing my S3 client. Remember, we talked about that. And then the bucket name, which we're passing that in, which is just our data lake, right? And then we're creating our S key, which is silver merged. And we did that a few seconds ago for this. Now, if you go look at the upload, so let's go ahead and go to it. So we're logging. I don't need to do this, but this kind of just forces me to see that it's a client. I guess I could just clean it up a little bit and say this, paste, and then just do that. And then that's really all it is it S3 client, the bucket name, the key that we created, which is really just your file structure, and then the data itself. So let's run this. I'm going to put a breakpoint right here. It's still pretty fast, even though it's pretty massively large now. Let's go ahead and just jump, and we're putting it in there, jump, and just like that, I think we're about done. It should say done. So, okay, so now it's done because it goes to the next cursor, and then we save it to our file and we print. So it wasn't too bad. So let's go over here and look. If I hit refresh, remember this is 30,000 rows of data. We're going to silver, and there's our data. Now if I click on this and download it, this now is in Hadoop format, which I don't like. If you notice, it's throwing an error because it wants a comma there, but I didn't create the product. You think Hadoop would just leave it as a normal JSON, that would get rid of this headache, but it didn't. But most importantly is it merged those two files, name, notice it renamed our column to description, our details, you know, and then again, this is mock data. So this is 30,000 rows of mock data, right? I mean, it's massively huge, as you can tell. How much do we actually have? The fact that it's flat, looks how many rows of data it is. Yeah, so this, well, it gave us a blank line at the end, but it's pretty much 30,000. So we'll go back up here. Oops, let me do that. I'm going to grab this little, come on now. If I can get my clicking right. Scroll back up to here. Again, the biggest thing is there's no commas at the end. That's not an array format. If you put this into a JSON validator, it's going to fail immediately. It does already. But more importantly, it is what Glue is looking for. So I'm going to stop this video, probably get more coffee, just do some stuff, and then we'll come back and talk about Glue and Athena, because believe it or not, that's the hardest part. It wasn't too bad. I started after 8 o'clock. It is now almost 10, so less than 2 hours because I took a break. I actually got a cup of coffee in one of my breaks. But let's talk about our ETL for a second, and then we'll come back. We did cheat by reading local files. You wouldn't want to do that, but I showed you how to do the dynamic, right? So let's talk about our ETL. A couple things I like to do. You saw me do this. Let's go ahead and do some refactoring. So code, format the code, and say kind of put my spaces in place. And also I like to do the cleanup, and that's just going to make sure that there's nothing in there that I don't think is in there. The one thing that I do like about this is I could say codium explain or docstring, and it will actually put out information for that. Oh, there's that path I was looking for earlier, but that's okay. We're going to get rid of this. That will actually put out documentation, so some programs will use that for your README files and stuff. And maybe I'll do that later, but let's go ahead and close all this. Let's go with our, not our start. We need to get rid of all our breakpoints. Okay. And we can get rid of our stop commands. And again, I just use that for debugging purposes. So in our main, what we've done, same as the other app, we've created a command line tool. This command line tool is using getting our access and secret from our property files. Our property files are then read in through our repository or setter repository, which really makes it a getter and setter type situation. So if there's another one I need, I would just do a another getter setter and put in the name that matches what's in the property file. And then just call it like I am over here, right here. The next thing we do is we create a client and a resource, and they are two different things. So be careful. Some things want the client, something wants the resources. And you saw that. So let's go ahead and, is this anything I want to keep? Who cares, right? If I do, then oh well, because this app's going to be deleted anyway. This is just a demo. So what we do is I don't like to run my functions, my function processes or anything that could be moved into another function or method inside my main. So what I do is I call those inside my main, as you saw me do that. So we're passing, because I don't know if I need my resource or my client, but I'm passing both those, my bucket and my key. We really don't need the key here because the key is going to change, but that's okay. So the first thing we're going to do is go to that. Now I like using what I call well, I don't just call it, it's actually one of the best practice methods, which is a workflow method, which means you have one method or function that is executing the process of the order of things need to be called. So in this case, what we're doing, we're actually not using this, but what we did was we read up and we got the buckets and we looped through the buckets. And to automate this, I may do one more video or I may just write it and show you how to do it because it really wouldn't take long. The concept is you could put an event whenever a file got dropped into the S3 bucket to kick off your code. And the first thing we're going to do is read inside that folder of that bucket, being bronze, use those files in our other code, right? And then what we're going to do with that is we'll execute this to download that. And in other words, we wouldn't keep those files in those other environments. If you remember, one of the bad things about this architect is that you could have triple version of your files. But in order to do that, we execute them as they're being dropped into place. And that way it's very clean. And I only have my end result file that I need, not the other layers, unless I just want them there for sake of referencing again. But the point is, in my raw gets jumped into bronze. Bronze can kick off an event then to kick off my ETL, which would take these files, basically merge them, put them into a Hadoop format. Now, if we look at the merge, so go to implementation, and the merge is what's doing all the work, right? So here we're hard coding the path, but you wouldn't want to do that, and you probably wouldn't want to work on these files in caching. So you probably would want to download them and work on them locally. That really depends on you. You could work on it in cache, in memory, but the problem is if you're working with massive bulk files, then that can be very cumbersome, and you need a lot of resources, right? Well, I guess you would too if you download locally. But anyway, tomato, you figure that one out. So from here, I hard-coded the paths to the files. We read them. And then what we did here is we dropped them into data frames, pandas data frames. We normalize it, which means flatten it. Not everything can be flattened. So just keep that in mind. If you have like 20 rows of, of cascading inside your JSON, maybe you should look at how you're doing your JSON. But there's ways around that, right? So don't worry about that. There's a lot of good documentation out there. There's a lot of Google Docs out there that you can read. Now, and then from here, what we're doing is we're setting the indexes. And if you remember at the very beginning, I said I didn't want to do that in the database because we're going to do that in the code. So I did that here, set the indexes. I set these. In place means that it can do it on the fly. So you don't have to stop it and restart it. And when I do my join, this should be down here. I don't know why it's up there. But join, you have a lot of options about, do you want to do inner join, outer join, left, right, whatever you want to do. The same as SQL Server, or any database, you would have those same options here. So if you don't see your data mapping the way you expect it, then maybe look at that. The other things you can concatenate. Concatenate is not the same as join. Concatenate really means I just copy it over. Okay. I do that with another customer because they didn't care about that relationship. And the truth is they didn't have IDs in both files that I could concatenate on. that I could join on. So concatenate just lays it out flat. The problem with that is you won't have that relationship. Okay. So that's what that is. Join, to JSON. I don't know why that's there, so don't really care. We're going to get rid of that one. That's probably just one of those tool things like that. I just put it in place. The other thing too is you can do things once it's over here and you have it merged. Some things I noticed I had to change before it was merged, and some things I could change once it's after merged. So for an example, I can reset the column names, which is what we're doing here. You could do each one of these individually, or just don't, or maybe just do the one you want and take the other ones out. Okay. Not a big deal, but here I can also change the data type. You saw the other option where it says to, right? So to string, to whatever. So you can force it to be a data type, which is very important when you're doing any kind of data science. And then the other thing too is you can bring your data. So let's say I want an average of metrics. I can actually do that, put it in a column, and then I can delete the other columns that's not being used, right? So that's how you do that. You drop those. And then the axis, look that up. That's really just keeping the relationship in a way. It's a little bit more than that, but it's beyond what I want to explain on this video. Just Google it. It's very easy to explain. So then once we do that, let's get rid of our print again here. Most of those are just for debugging purposes, right? And then we're going to return that. So if we go back to here to our start, once that's returned, I call it Hadoop format because that's really what it is. That's why we're doing that. If not, it would just be in JSON. The inline's true is what gives it that one. Do I still have it open? Is what gives it that everything in one line like this. So that's kind of cool. And if you have an older version of Pandas, it doesn't support that yet. You kind of have to do it yourself. And what I mean by doing it yourself, you can still do it in a flat way, but you have to remove your commas, and that's very tricky if you have any in your rows, right? But you can actually use regex to remove the commas and the square brackets. That's the way I used to have to do it whenever I cleaned up JSON files, and it's kind of messy again because you got to be careful that you're moving the right commas, right? And you can just do a replace, right? Dot replace, and that works. But again, be careful. So the way I used to do that was if it's I don't know, but let's see, replace and do something like maybe it's something like this. Oops, not that one. Sorry, this. Then I want to replace it with nothing, right? And nothing. Seriously? See, help really is coming. All right, fine. We'll do. There we go. So that would kind of work if you do it correctly. Oh, I see what's going on. There we go. So, and then I need to replace that with that. And that would remove the commas, right? Because you're making sure it's at the end of each line. And then, of course, if it's just a square bracket, you could just replace it with nothing. So, and that would kind of give you the same thing, but it's just easier to do it this way because you got to be careful. As soon as Python or any other anything converts it to a string, it's going to want to escape those characters. And that was the one problem I had whenever I was trying to do the bulk upload. Now, we said at the time, we created our key. I ended up not using this, so that's fine. So we'll comment that out and we'll get rid of that because we were going to try to do it send large, which we did in the other video. But again, the send large, it escapes and it breaks the format that Glue wants to use. This Hadoop concept. But if we upload to S3, again, I call it a Hadoop format, our client, our bucket, and the S3 we talked about in a few minutes. So we just go in here. It really is just getting the client, put object, the bucket name, the key, and the data that you want to upload. And I would do that without downloading and reading a file. Just do it right in the memory, which is what I'm doing here. Yeah, I'm not saving it to a file after that. So why am I doing this? Open. Oh, I'm just writing it out so we can look at it. Yeah, but notice I call this before I write it out. So let's get rid of that so there's no confusion. And that's pretty much it, other than logging and your basic stuff. So it was kind of cool. So that was the biggest function process was the ETL, because there's a lot more you can do here. The biggest thing that you want to spend time on is pandas. Hopefully you're not a beginner to Python. If you are, then a lot of this was probably a foreign language anyway. But if you, I don't know why I try to bring those in, but that's okay. If you are used to Python, then odds are you've seen pandas before. The only other refracting I would have done here is probably create more classes, right? Bring some of this out into something like this, where it's an actual class, and then just call the methods from there. Anyway, so I hope this was kind of useful. I'm going to break, and then we're going to come back and look at the actual functions inside Amazon, which is going to finish our process out from that point. Because even over here, so we got our data lake, we've got our inside of our data lake, we got our bronze, which is here. Again, those would be removed, okay? So we would delete those. And that really is So when I said put object, where create bucket upload right here, there is really an S3 client. Oops, S3 client delete object. Right? Is that what it is? S3. Let's see. Anyway, there's a delete object. I thought it was off of S3, but it may not be. And anyway, I know there's an S3 client bucket name dot delete. Yeah, delete objects. So okay, so you could use this, so which means we don't need that. Okay, and then that will work. So and here this is actually looping. Well, no, that's right. So that's how you do that, I think. I'm just thinking. Yeah, it wants this JSON type format deal. So, okay, so that would work. But again, if I delete the objects, just look it up real quick. Just Boto3 and look up delete, right? But the point is, back to over here, what I would do in our flow is we have our bronze, and we're going to talk about these other folders here soon. But we have our bronze. Our data gets dropped into our bronze. That's from the raw environment. We saw that, right? Maybe read through an API or whatever, do a bulk upload to here. And then from silver, what we're doing is we're downloading those files. We're going to manipulate those files, merge them into one, and then upload it to silver. And in that process, we can do any other ETL process we want to do, right? ETL, extract, transform, load. So your transform is being done in the code. Technically, it's all done in the code. But you can do whatever you need to with these files at that point. Now, the next phase is going to be our gold copy, right? So our gold is where our final state is. And we're going to actually do that inside Amazon. So hope this was helpful.